How are you doing, gardeners? Ed and Delia Schneider here in Burlingame, Kansas, and welcome to our very first YouTube show. It is awfully cold outside, doggone cold.
Very cold.
Very cold, and we are currently at sub-temperatures. I think most of the nation is going through cyclone bombs up in the northeast and all that type of stuff. Our water lines are currently frozen in the house right now, but it's too cold to really get underneath there. I'm going to wait till it gets above zero and see how it goes. So anyway, give you guys a little bit of a background about Ed and Delia. I'm originally from West Central Illinois, and I ended up growing up in a farming community near Quincy, Illinois. And Delia, you grew up?
I am a city girl, and I grew up in Hudson County, New Jersey.
New Jersey?
Yes, right across from Manhattan, New York.
So you're probably wondering, how in the world did these two knuckleheads get together? And I, with my farming background, and for her who had a non-farming background, we both ended up, ironically, going into the agricultural side of college. I got an agribusiness degree out of Black Hawk College up in Kewanee, Illinois.
And I have an animal science degree from Rutgers University.
So she went to Rutgers. We won't talk about their curriculum, what they teach these kids. However, we did meet at a company called DeKalb Swine Breeders out in Plains, Kansas in the year 1981. And that's where we first met, first started dating. And now my family has been in vegetables for a number of years now, since the 80s, back in Illinois. And Mike and Teresa Rogie, and then we have also 3 acres back in Mount Sterling that Mom and Dad, Tom and Nancy Schneider, they had, they grew some pumpkins, they grew strawberries, and Mike and Teresa grew a lot of strawberries. Mill Creek Farms, Quincy, Illinois, if you want to look them up. But we got inspired, or I was inspired by them, of how they were able to take their land and capitalize on, at that time, under the U-pick market. Now U-pick was in its infancy when Mike and Teresa began. So we got 10 acres of land. We built a nice shop. We have, I would say out of the 10 acres, probably 5 acres is what I would call tillable type of ground. And we got going. So let's go ahead and start off with our first year.
Well, we moved here 2019, spring of 2019, and we started a small little patch just for ourselves.
And that was probably what, 20 by 20?
At most.
Yeah, so it was a small patch. It had 12 tomato plants for our own family garden. Kind of a, no sense of direction, more as a hobby at the time. Just purely to go out and pick a tomato. And
tomatoes, peppers.
We actually grew some good Brussels sprouts, but I think the bugs got into them. So there we go. We got our first vegetable patch. Again, I'm still further motivated by my sister and brother-in-law, Mike and Teresa, and we decided that let's go ahead and plant something with some residual income, because the very first thing we did
was asparagus.
And how many? What did we plant? 2,000 crowns?
I would say about 1,700.
1,700 crowns, and so we have 2 patches for our asparagus. And last year was our second picking of the asparagus. First year, no pick. And I got to tell you that the weed control in asparagus still baffles me. We're always learning on that stuff. However, we have been selling asparagus. And so we got so that comes out to roughly 2 to 3/10 of an acre in asparagus. But the nice thing we thought about the asparagus is it's residual. We don't have to do a whole lot other than worry about the weed control and pick asparagus. For this year, we'll probably get to go about 4 weeks. We'll get to go about a month picking asparagus out here. So the nice thing is it's coming. This next April, we're going to have asparagus again. and that type
But
of
I
thing.
think now that the bugs know the asparagus patch is there, we
we,
probably will have more,
there's
more
always
issues with
there's
bugs.
always something on the bugs on that one. So we did the asparagus, and we decided to go ahead, and I think we planted a couple hundred tomato plants. We had our first onions, and at that time was my very first jump at lasagna bed type of farming. You know, the 30-inch bed. I don't want to really call it raised. It's really it is raised a tad, but it's really more about getting, creating a lower aisleway and shoving that in there. So it's kind of a raised lasagna bed, 30 inches wide, more or less. Planting 4 onions per row, and we enjoyed following many of the YouTube advice we got out there, and we also started putting in drip irrigation there, and then we planted about 2/10 of an acre, 3/10 of an acre in watermelon.
Not that year?
No, not watermelon. Pumpkins.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be very
good.
successful. Very successful. We started doing the Auburn Farmers Market that year, and we started doing a Topeka Farmers Market uptown, for those of you that are from the area. So we started doing that. We took a stab at...
We did sweet corn that year, too.
We did a poor job of sweet corn that year. Yeah, I mean, so some of it came out good. Varieties are very... You got to learn which variety is going to work best for your area. As my brother-in-law Mike says, if you read the seed catalog, they're all great. So that's just the way that is. So now we get there, and I'm going to look at my notes here. Just want to talk about it. Yeah, and so also that year, my friend, I borrowed a skid steer, Bruce Lessner. I borrowed a skid steer, and we already discussed we were going to go ahead and buy a greenhouse. And we actually went ahead and started putting it up that year,
right,
but not finishing it.
Right.
I'm good at starting a project. Finishing a project is the issue, isn't it, Delia?
Mm-hmm.
So we did that, and I got it done. And this is a 20 by 48 greenhouse. It's not a government greenhouse, and I can't think of the name of that. But who we have?
NRCS.
NRCS. So we didn't go with that year. All right.
Well, we applied, but it takes a couple of
Yeah,
years.
we
Plus,
applied.
we also had to have
had
crops in the ground.
We had to have
for
crops
them
in the
to
ground.
approve it.
So that was the purpose of us growing those crops and getting that established. So we did that. We had the frame up that year. Everything was pretty well done, other than the fronts, and then the track for our wiggle wire.
Right.
That was about it. Once I kind of got there's no the hard part for me. On the high tunnels, we're not building a greenhouse, we're building high tunnels. The hardest part for me was understanding that there's not one way anybody does an end cap of either end of the greenhouse. Everybody's got their own little
method,
their own type of materials. Do you go with plastic? Do you go with poly? Do you follow what I mean? How big of a door? And then something that Delia and I have to take into consideration, even though we live in eastern Kansas and not western Kansas, is we still get a tremendous amount of wind here.
Plus, we're on top of a hill.
And
so.
the high tunnels are on top of the hill. So let's go ahead so we braced it very well, poured concrete, did different things to try to hold our house down in the high winds. And we've had 70-mile-an-hour winds.
Yep.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
So far, so
Well,
good.
when we had the 70 miles, we didn't have the plastic.
We didn't have the
It was
plastic.
only the frame.
Okay. All right.
So.
Very well said. We don't know. So anyway, we turned that around, got the house up, and then we come around to year 3, and it's February to March, and the weather was good. We got the high tunnel in.
It's all finished.
It's
Plastic's
finished. That
up.
plastic's up. We got it looking pretty good. We had it looking pretty good, and one of our neighbors had a fire, and it was a very windy day, and boy, did it take off. So a lot of our drip irrigation
melted
in the fire, and that type of thing. I wish it would have finished burning off all the weeds. It would have made it easier to work the ground, but it did. Of course, the fire department come out and
ran over the asparagus patch.
The asparagus patch multiple times, made a road out of the asparagus patch right before it's ready to come up. Turned right around, and my neighbor had a brand new fence up, and what did they do? They drove right through the fence instead of going to the gate. Anyway, a lot of problems you get into on properties and things like that. So we turned right around, and we increased our onions from 2,000 to about 2,000 onions, right?
We went from about 8 bundles, and each bundle has about maybe 75 little seedlings in
75 to 100.
30 bundles.
So 30 bundles. Yeah. So what does that math come out to?
A lot.
So we did that, and we also the previous fall started our first garlic, and there's learning curves on all this stuff. But we're up to 5 rows between garlic and
up to this point, most of the things we planted, we purchased as seedlings from the
that's by year 2. Year two was all seedlings
that we purchased. Year 3, I started a whole bunch. So that was a major undertaking for that year.
All the tomatoes this last year was all grown by Delia,
except for the ones we bought from the farmers market.
We were a little late, so we did jump ahead, and we got those into what we call the small high tunnel. And we do have already during last year, year two or year 3, what 2 we'll call it. I went ahead and we got approved for the high tunnel from NRCS, and so we went ahead and started building that facility. We got everything up, other than the plastic again, and we got to finish my end walls and that type of thing. But again, I'm just trying to figure out exactly what I want to do. High winds on the hill really hit that end wall, and at the same token, July, August, September, we don't get the winds, and at that time it's hot. So we're going to do a drop-down curtain on that when we get to it. All this, of course, you're going to see in our YouTube videos as we get going. So we turn right around. Last year we built another greenhouse. Started it. We did grow 3 new varieties of sweet corn. We did very well. We did also buy a tractor 2 years ago, a 1586 International. Here's the funny thing about tractors. What Delia and I really need is about a 40 horsepower tractor, a small tractor. You would think that would be the way to go. However, have you seen the prices of tractors? And that tractor is probably the highest in demand across the country, because a lot of small 5-acre and that type of thing landowners, that's their tractor. They want that tractor. So we was able to buy the 1586 International, which has 165 horsepower, for about $13,500.
It went from a little tractor into
a big tractor. And that came around to a friend of mine in Iowa who has an M&W Dynadrive. And the Dynadrive kind of acts like a garden tiller. It's 15 foot wide, and it requires 10 horsepower per foot. Now, this is a very heavy piece of machinery. So all of a sudden, I went from needing that small 40 horsepower tractor to okay, what are we going to do? And then Richard has this M&W that we were able to get at a very, very good price, cheaper than I could buy an actual tiller for a tractor at your local farm store. So that required more horsepower, which turned right around and said, well, let me see if I can find a tractor that would pull that, and that's where the 1586 come into play. So we have that. So what did that do? We went from farming about half an acre of total ground, the asparagus. The asparagus is another 3/10 of an acre, so maybe we're up to 3/4 of a total acre growing longer term type crops, pumpkins and tomatoes and onions, and nothing really fast flipping like microgreens or lettuce or anything like that. But we turned right around, got the tractor. I'm going to tell you this, is there would be no way I could have done the amount of work with a little garden tiller as I was able to do with that tractor. And literally in about 20 minutes, I was able to do 5 acres, 6 acres of ground, 5 acres of ground, and open up the ground. So now, all of a sudden, sweet corn becomes more of a factor. Pumpkins is a larger area of pumpkins because we sold very well out of that area. And so we moved to a new part of the farm. We are now capitalizing on a lot of the farm. And what happened when we first planted our sweet corn 2 years ago?
Was it the water?
It was the rain. We don't just get, if you look at our annual rainfall, you'll find out there that you say, well, they get about 30, 35 inches of rain, and that's wonderful. Most folks will be thrown to death. Here in eastern Kansas, however, when we get rain at times, we'll get 3 inches of rain. How much did we get last week in 1 week?
Well, it wasn't last week.
Or last year.
This past summer, there was one period that we got almost 8 inches of rain in like a day and a half. That's what we get. That was not good.
So basically, if we're getting 35 inches a year, 8 inches of that rain, we are subject here to flash flooding. That's just kind of the best way to put it. We're subject to flash flooding, and so those are some different things we got to deal with. And so our seed, of course, got saturated.
Yeah, the first batch was
saturated,
totally done.
And we did that. But then Delia and I persevered. We got some corn planted, not as much ground as we wanted. We get around here, that was 2 years ago.
That was 2 years ago.
And last year, we...
Pretty much the same thing.
Pretty much a similar thing with the cooler temps, and we couldn't get things done. So I surprised Delia this year with her Christmas present. We planted an acre of sweet corn, a half acre.
By hand.
By hand. All by hand. Actually, it was over a half acre. We planted all by hand, and I knew the perfect Christmas present for Delia this year, and it was a Model 7000 John Deere planter 6-row, and I know she. I don't want to say exactly how she replied, but now that opens it up for us now to timely plantings and things like that. We have a lot more to learn on that level. We haven't used that piece of machinery and that type of thing. That being said, that's the evolution of our farm as of this point. I wish we could say that up until this point, every tomato that we sold went to buy the tractor straight out. I wish I could say that every onion and pumpkin and all that went into pure profit and let's just take this bankroll of money and get in. The fact is we have sunk an investment into this. Just like the high tunnel that's not quite finished by the NRCS, that's roughly $10,000 or in that more. How much more? I mean,
well, the
it's a 30 by 72.
The kit for was over 12. It was around
12. Okay, so 12,000, and we're gonna get 7,000 back from the NRCS. That's where we're at on that agreement. So there is a financial side to what Delia and I have invested in, but we are getting more money coming in.
This past year we did much better than we did the first year that we were selling.
The town of Topeka now has 2 farmers markets, and the farmers market that we currently we choose to go at a new farmers market because the uptown farmers market, as wonderful as that is, and it is a very busy place on Saturdays.
It's well established.
Well established, but they don't know us.
Correct.
It's very frustrating to be the new guy on the block, and you turn right around and you have money. Your tomatoes are right there. Price. We're just going to say we're at price at $2.50 a pound. Neighbor's price at $3 a pound. He's been there longer. He's established. And what did people do? They go to the neighbor, pay the $3, And you know, and I know the man. He's a very nice man, very nice woman that are there. However, they're established. So Delia and I felt, well, when the new farmers market opened up, I said, let's go there. Let's get to become the established.
Starting from the ground up. Yeah.
Starting from the ground up. People know us, and all of a sudden,
we did much better.
We did much better. And on top of it, I will advise to anybody who wants to enter this type of a field is variety. Having variety is a good thing. It has its own burden, but at the same token, and I guarantee you that regardless of how much you plant, someone's going to ask you for something that you don't carry. You know, that's going to go with that. We grew Swiss chard, and we sold Swiss chard, and $3, $2 for a
big giant bag
full. A bag full of Swiss chard. I gave away a lot of Swiss chard just to try to develop a market, because it is a very good vegetable. But I think in the end, for all the amount of work that you put into Swiss chard for our area, I'm basically putting in a lot of effort and time to get little money in return, and things like that happen. So we have the investment. We're starting to see some return. We are now going to farmers markets in not only Auburn, which was our very first farmers market, but we also added Overbrook, Kansas,
and the
Topeka farmers market. And then I also have an outlet. There's a couple of crops out there that we just have to deal with when it's time. Sweet corn is one. We don't grow strawberries, but when strawberries are ripe, you got to get rid of them. So we have an outlet that I'll just call it an overflow location that we can sell our products at. Delia sold there. Asparagus is another one. When all of a sudden you get a week of 70s to near 80s for a high, all of a sudden that asparagus takes off, and for no more ground than we have. How many pounds in a day were we getting? 19 pounds?
Oh, more. I think we had a couple days in the 20s.
Okay, so you get into those 19, 18, 20 pound days, and here you went to the Saturday farmers market, and you don't have another farmers market till Tuesday. You can't expect Tuesday in our community to get rid of all of that asparagus. It'll keep a little while, but
2 or 3 days.
2 or 3 days.
But if you're getting 20 pounds a day, by that Tuesday you're going to have now 80 pounds to sell.
80, that's right. So we ended up having some overflow spots. I would drive in, set up my little booth in the corner of town of Auburn, and sell my stuff. So we have that going. Now, we're a little too far out, sitting about 5 to 7 miles, let's call it 7 miles, out of a very small community. So expecting people to come to our location is not realistic. Not here. I think it'd be wise if one day that perhaps we do get a location that you could have more of a retail greenhouse, but we live on a gravel road. We get to maybe having 7 to 10 cars a day for the entire thing, and one of those vehicles is a school bus twice a day. So that's where we're at on that. So more or less where we're at right now is the infant stages of our business. We're happy to bring you along. Delia, you got anything you want to talk about as far as what you've seen in your own growth of the business?
I just think being newbies myself, a very big newbie, every year we make huge mistakes and we learn from them, and the following year we hope not to make that same mistake, but we end up making a different mistake. So it's a growing process, it's a learning process.
It is. Anyway, folks, we're happy that you came along. Thanks for watching the video. Please subscribe and hit that little bell icon to get notified when we put out a new video. We have a lot of footage from this last year to show you some of the stuff. It's going to get better, I promise you. So anyway, thanks a lot, and glad to have you along, folks. And until we see you again, great gardening.